The night was unnervingly quiet. A thin layer of fog hung over the quiet cul-de-sac of Maplewood Lane, the kind of neighborhood where porch lights stayed on late and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then went silent. Then came the sound. A single, sharp crack split the stillness like glass breaking. It was over so quickly that most of the neighbors barely stirred. One woman, half asleep on her couch, sat up and listened. After a long moment, she exhaled, convinced it had just been a car backfiring or a leftover firework from the weekend. The houses settled back into silence, unaware that inside one of them, a life had just ended. The Grayson house stood at the very end of the street, warm light spilling faintly from the living room windows. From the outside, it looked like the picture of suburban stability: trimmed hedges, a white fence, a red door with a brass knocker polished to perfection. Inside, however, chaos reigned. Thomas Grayson stood frozen in the middle of the bedroom, his hands trembling, a revolver hanging loosely at his side. His face was ghostly pale, his chest heaving in shallow, panicked breaths. On the floor lay his wife, Evelyn. Her body was twisted at an unnatural angle, her eyes wide open, unblinking, as if still frozen in shock from the final moment of her life. A crimson pool spread beneath her head, soaking into the pale carpet fibers. Thomas's knees buckled, and he stumbled backward, colliding with the dresser. A lamp toppled to the floor with a dull thud, plunging half the room into darkness. No, he gasped, his voice cracking. He dropped the gun. It clattered across the hardwood floor, spinning wildly before coming to rest beneath the bed. For a long moment, the only sound was the pounding of his heart. Hours later, red and blue lights bathed the quiet street as two patrol cars pulled up. Curious neighbors gathered behind their curtains, trying to catch glimpses of the unfolding drama without being seen. Detective Marla Jensen stepped out of her car, her sharp eyes scanning the pristine neighborhood. It didn't feel like a murder scene, not yet. It felt wrong in a way she couldn't name. Inside, Thomas sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands, rocking slightly. His shirt was stained with blood, his eyes wild and unfocused. "It was an accident," he said hoarsely, repeating the words like a prayer. It just happened. "We were arguing and the gun went off." Marla crouched to his level, studying him carefully. "Where's the weapon now, Mr. Grayson?" Thomas hesitated, his lips parting, then closing again. Finally, he pointed vaguely toward the bedroom without looking up. "Under the bed," he muttered. The detective noted the tremor in his voice. When the officers retrieved the revolver, they found it wiped nearly clean. Too clean. In the corner of the room, a framed wedding photo caught Marla's attention. Thomas and Evelyn, 30 years younger, stood beneath a white archway covered in roses. They looked radiant, deeply in love, the kind of couple everyone envied. Marla turned to Thomas. "How long were you and your wife married?" 30 years, he whispered. Something unreadable flickered across his face. As the paramedics zipped Evelyn's body into a black bag, Thomas's shoulders sagged. He leaned forward, burying his face in his blood-stained hands. Then, in a voice so low it was almost inaudible, he whispered to no one in particular, "You lied to me all these years." Thomas sat silently in the police interrogation room, his hands cuffed and resting on the cold metal table. Detective Marla Jensen's questions blurred into a meaningless hum. 30 years. 30 years of marriage, of trust, of what he thought was love. As his mind drifted, he wasn't in that sterile, fluorescent-lit room anymore. He was back in the past, to the very first night he saw Evelyn. It was the fall of 1995, and the campus was buzzing with life. The air was crisp, scented with fallen leaves and cigarette smoke. Music pulsed from the gymnasium where the college homecoming party was in full swing. Thomas, then just 21, stood awkwardly near the punch table, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Socializing had never been his strength. His friends had dragged him there, insisting he needed to get out and meet someone. He didn't feel like someone anyone would want to meet. Tall, lanky, with a perpetually nervous expression, Thomas had always felt invisible, a background character in other people's lives. And then he saw her, Evelyn. She stood near the dance floor, laughing with a small group of people. The room seemed to bend toward her, like she was a magnet drawing every eye. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her striking green eyes shimmered under the string lights. She carried herself with the effortless confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. She didn't just seem beautiful. She seemed untouchable. "Go talk to her." One of his friends nudged him. Thomas shook his head violently. "Are you kidding? She's way out of my league." But Evelyn must have sensed his gaze because she turned and smiled. A soft, knowing smile that made his heart race. Before Thomas could react, she crossed the room with graceful, measured steps. "You've been staring," she said, her voice smooth, playful. "You planning to say hello or just keep gawking?" Thomas stammered, heat rushing to his face. Hi, I'm Thomas." "Evelyn," she replied, extending her hand. "Now we've met." From that moment, everything changed. Their connection was instant, electric. They spent the rest of the night talking in a quiet corner, away from the thumping music and drunken laughter. Evelyn was charming, mysterious. She had a way of making Thomas feel like the most interesting man in the world, even as she revealed almost nothing about herself. Whenever Thomas asked about her past, where she grew up, her family, her childhood, Evelyn would smile and artfully change the subject. At first he found it alluring. She was like a puzzle, and he was determined to solve her. But there were moments, fleeting and subtle, when her mask slipped. A shadow would pass over her face if he pressed too hard, so he stopped asking. He told himself love didn't need explanations. Their romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, Thomas was deeply, hopelessly in love. They were married in a small ceremony the following spring. Thomas's parents were supportive at first, but his mother Margaret couldn't hide her unease. "She's beautiful," Margaret said cautiously the night before the wedding, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Almost too beautiful." "Thomas, don't you think it's strange how little we know about her?" Thomas bristled. "Mom, please." "She's private, that's all. Not everyone likes to talk about their past." Margaret's lips tightened. "You deserve honesty. Don't let love blind you." The conversation ended in anger, but her words lodged deep in his mind like a splinter. Their wedding day was simple but perfect, or so it seemed. Evelyn glided down the aisle in a flowing white dress, her smile dazzling, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. When they kissed, Thomas felt like his life had truly begun. But later that night, when they were alone, Evelyn seemed distant, even tense. She brushed off his attempts at intimacy with soft laughter and whispered excuses. "It's just nerves," she told him, tracing his cheek with delicate fingers. "We have forever, don't we?" Thomas wanted to believe her, and he did, for 30 long years. Back in the present, Thomas blinked against the harsh fluorescent light of the interrogation room. Detective Jensen's voice cut through his memories. "Tell me about your wife, Mr. Grayson," she said. "Start at the beginning." Thomas swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "She was everything I ever wanted," he whispered. And for the first time he wondered if he'd been in love with a lie all along. Thomas's words hung heavy in the interrogation room. "She was everything I ever wanted," he whispered, his voice trembling. Detective Marla Jensen leaned forward, studying him carefully. "You said that before. But marriages don't just fall apart overnight, Mr. Grayson. Tell me what changed." Thomas let out a bitter laugh, hollow and dry. His eyes drifted toward the ceiling as memories surged back, unbidden and merciless. The first year of their marriage was intoxicating. Thomas and Evelyn had moved into a small apartment above a bakery, the air always rich with the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon. They would stay up late talking about dreams of travel and building a life together. For Thomas, it felt like a fairy tale, even when Evelyn insisted on keeping certain parts of her life private. She kept no personal photos, no mementos, no stories of childhood memories. Whenever he asked, she would kiss him softly and whisper, "Some things are better left in the past." Thomas accepted that, eager to prove his love was unconditional. But as time passed, cracks began to form. Evelyn was affectionate in public, the doting wife with her hand tucked into Thomas's arm. But behind closed doors, she grew distant. Nights in their bedroom became fraught with tension. Whenever Thomas reached for her, she would gently push him away, offering vague excuses. "I'm tired, darling. Not tonight, I'm not feeling well. It's just work stress." Thomas told himself it was normal, that marriages had ebbs and flows. But the excuses never stopped. Months passed, then years, and their physical closeness never deepened. When Thomas gently raised the subject of children, Evelyn's reaction startled him. Her body went rigid, her green eyes flashing with something like fear. "I don't want children," she said sharply. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Thomas, who had always dreamed of becoming a father, swallowed his disappointment. "Of course," he murmured, forcing a smile. "Whatever makes you happy." And just like that, the conversation was over. It would never be brought up again. Over time, Evelyn began to subtly reshape their world. At first, it was small things, encouraging Thomas to take a job closer to home, suggesting they spend weekends together rather than visiting his parents. Then it became more direct. Whenever Thomas tried to make plans with old friends, Evelyn would feign hurt. "Why don't you want to spend time with me? Am I not enough?" Her tone was soft, vulnerable, but her words left him guilt-ridden. Slowly, almost without realizing it, Thomas's world narrowed until Evelyn was at the center of it. Phone calls to friends became rare. Visits to his family dwindled to holidays only. Even his career ambitions dimmed. Thomas had once dreamed of running his own business, but Evelyn always found reasons to discourage him. "It's too risky," she'd say. "Why jeopardize the stability we have?" So he stayed in his safe, unfulfilling job, telling himself that sacrifices were part of marriage. One rainy afternoon, Thomas came home early from work, eager to surprise Evelyn. As he stepped quietly into the apartment, he caught the faint smell of smoke. Alarmed, he rushed to the kitchen, but there was no fire. The scent was coming from the living room. There, in the fireplace, Evelyn knelt before a small pile of burning papers. Her face was expressionless, her movements precise. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" Thomas asked, startled. She jerked upright, blocking his view of the flames. "Just cleaning out some old junk," she said smoothly, too smoothly. Thomas's gaze darted to the edge of a photograph curling in the fire. It was black and white, old-fashioned, and showed a young Evelyn, barely recognizable. "Wait," he said, stepping forward. "Why are you burning these?" "I've never even seen them." Evelyn's expression hardened. "Because they don't matter," she snapped. Her voice softened immediately, almost tender. "Some memories aren't worth keeping, Thomas. You trust me, don't you?" The question wasn't a question at all. It was a command. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I trust you." But inside, unease stirred like a dark cloud on the horizon. That night, lying awake beside her, Thomas stared at the ceiling. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just Evelyn being private, just Evelyn being Evelyn. But deep down, something gnawed at him. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder what else Evelyn might be hiding. Back in the interrogation room, Detective Jensen's voice cut through his reverie. "Mr. Grayson, when did you first start to suspect your wife wasn't who she said she was?" Thomas's lips trembled. "The photographs," he whispered. "That was when I realized I didn't know her at all." Detective Marla Jensen leaned back in her chair, watching Thomas closely. "The photographs," she repeated. "That's when you began to suspect your wife?" Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "It was the first crack," he said softly. "But what came after? That's when everything started to unravel." It began innocently enough. On a bright Saturday morning at the local farmer's market, Thomas and Evelyn strolled hand in hand past rows of colorful produce and flower stalls. Evelyn seemed especially radiant that day, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her laughter carrying over the crowd. For a moment, Thomas felt like they were any normal couple again. The unease that had been gnawing at him since the burned photograph seemed almost silly in the warmth of that ordinary morning, until it happened. They were passing a honey vendor when a voice cut through the chatter. "Clara?" Evelyn froze. The name hung in the air like a sudden chill. Thomas turned to see an older woman standing a few feet away, her eyes wide with recognition. "Clara," the woman repeated, moving closer. "Oh my goodness, it is you." Evelyn recovered quickly, flashing a dazzling smile. "I'm sorry," she said lightly. "You must have me confused with someone else." But her grip on Thomas's hand tightened, painfully. The woman frowned, confused. "No, I could swear. You look exactly like her." She hesitated, then shook her head. "My mistake." With a polite nod, she melted back into the crowd. Evelyn's smile didn't falter until the woman was gone. Then, without a word, she tugged Thomas away from the market, walking so fast he had to jog to keep up. At home, Thomas finally spoke. "Evelyn, what was that about?" She seemed so certain she knew you. Evelyn laughed, but the sound was brittle. Thomas, really? People make mistakes. I just have one of those faces. One of those faces? He frowned. She didn't just think she recognized you. She called you by name. Evelyn's eyes sharpened, her tone turning cold. Are you accusing me of something? No, I just... Then drop it. Her voice cracked like a whip. It was nothing. The conversation ended there, but Thomas couldn't let it go. That night, as Evelyn slept beside him, he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Clara. The name echoed in his head like a warning bell. Over the next few days, Thomas found himself watching Evelyn more closely. Little things that had once seemed charming now struck him as suspicious. The way she flinched whenever someone mentioned their childhood. Her refusal to keep personal photos around the house. The fact that he had never met a single relative in 30 years of marriage. It was as though Evelyn had appeared in his life fully formed, with no past, no roots. And for the first time, Thomas began to wonder if he'd been deliberately kept in the dark. Driven by a gnawing need for answers, he started quietly digging. While Evelyn was out running errands one afternoon, Thomas sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, heart pounding as he typed her full name into search engines. Nothing. He tried her maiden name. Still nothing. No childhood addresses, no old yearbook photos, no trace of a birth certificate or hospital record. It was as if Evelyn had simply appeared in the world at the age of 22, the year she had met Thomas. A cold sweat prickled his skin. When Evelyn returned home, Thomas quickly closed his laptop, forcing a smile. How was your day? She asked, her tone light and sweet. Fine, he replied, though his throat felt tight, but Evelyn's sharp green eyes lingered on him a beat too long, as if she sensed the shift in him. That night, she was unusually affectionate, curling against him and whispering how much she loved him. Thomas held her, but his arms felt heavy. Awkward, because now, when he looked at his wife, he no longer saw the woman he'd married. He saw a stranger. Back in the interrogation room, Marla Jensen scribbled notes. So you started digging into her past, she said. What did you find, Mr. Grayson? Thomas's face crumpled. Nothing, he whispered. And that terrified me. Detective Marla Jensen leaned forward, her pen hovering over her notebook. So you found nothing, she repeated. No record of Evelyn before she met you? Thomas's voice was hoarse. Nothing. It was like she'd been manufactured. And I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. He let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling in his lap. But then, our anniversary came, and that's when I finally saw the truth. The day of their 30th wedding anniversary dawned bright and clear. The kind of crisp autumn morning that begged for celebration. Thomas had planned a surprise weekend getaway. A quaint cabin by the lake, just the two of them, a chance to rekindle what had been lost. He'd even taken off work early to prepare. Evelyn was out running errands. She'd asked him not to fuss, but Thomas wanted everything to be perfect. He moved through the bedroom, folding her favorite sweaters, carefully placing them in a suitcase. As he smoothed the last blouse, his hand brushed against something hard beneath the pile of neatly stacked clothes. Frowning, he pushed the garments aside. A small wooden box sat hidden in the back corner of the drawer. Its surface was worn smooth, the edges slightly scorched as though it had once been near fire. It was locked. Thomas's heart began to race. He almost closed the drawer, almost convinced himself to leave it untouched. But curiosity, sharpened by weeks of unease and unanswered questions, overpowered him. He searched the room, finally finding a tiny brass key tucked beneath Evelyn's jewelry case. His hands shook as he fitted it into the lock. The click was soft, almost innocent. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, were papers, dozens of them, yellowed with age. Thomas pulled them out slowly, his breath catching as he read. Hospital records, medical forms, documents stamped with a name he had never seen before. Clara Whitmore. His eyes darted to a date. Birth sex, male. For a moment, he couldn't process the words. His vision blurred, the letters swimming. No, he whispered. No, this can't be right. He flipped through the papers in a frenzy. Old photographs slipped free, images of a younger Evelyn, or rather, Clara. In some, the features were familiar yet subtly different. In others, she was almost unrecognizable, A small, faded photo of a child, a boy, stopped him cold. Thomas staggered back, clutching the photograph as though it might burn him. The room tilted. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. 30 years. 30 years of love, of trust, of believing he knew the woman lying beside him at night. And now, in a single heartbeat, that entire foundation crumbled. He sank to his knees. The papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. His mind raced, swinging wildly between disbelief and rage. Why hadn't she told him? Had their marriage been a lie from the very beginning? A cruel laugh bubbled up in his throat, quickly turning into a sob. Memories flashed through his mind. Their wedding day, the burned photographs, Evelyn's sharp refusal to have children, the stranger at the market calling her Clara. All the pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. He had been living with a stranger. The front door creaked open. Thomas froze. Every muscle locking tight. Thomas? Evelyn's voice floated down the hallway, warm and casual. I'm home. Did you get everything packed? Thomas's pulse thundered in his ears. His hands trembled as he clutched the photograph, unable to hide the storm of emotions raging inside him. Her footsteps drew closer, steady and unhurried, and Thomas knew with a bone-deep certainty that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The sound of Evelyn's footsteps grew louder, each one echoing through the hallway like the tolling of a distant bell. Thomas stood frozen in the bedroom, surrounded by scattered papers and photographs. The wooden box lay open on the floor, its terrible contents exposed to the light. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as adrenaline surged through his veins. Thomas? Evelyn's voice floated through the doorway, warm and casual, like nothing was wrong. Is everything okay? Why are you so quiet? He turned slowly, the photograph still clutched in his trembling hand. His face was pale, almost ashen, his eyes wild with disbelief. Evelyn stepped into the room and stopped short. Her gaze darted from Thomas to the papers littering the floor, and for a brief moment her perfect composure cracked. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Thomas's voice was low and shaking. What is this, Evelyn? No answer.